Welcome to the podcast again for this week. Paul Kent, Steve Roach. How you going, guys?
I'm good, Matty.
Now, once again, to all the viewers, or if you're a listener, thank you for the continued feedback over the last month. Super League edition, the two game changes. Now, today we're going to shift a little bit again. Today we're going to select a couple of books, all films each. We're going to talk about how it impacted us, what we took out of it, and it doesn't need to be a sporting book. It can be what we learnt out of it. And, basically we're going to take the themes, we're going to pull it apart. Firstly, boys, did you ponder this much, or was it straightforward, what you picked?
Me, for mine, the books, because I don't read that many books.
Yeah.
So I come up with Kurt Fernley.
Yeah.
So that really inspired me during the years. But probably my movie, everyone would probably be able to guess it.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a second block.
Matty, I actually found it quite difficult. I obviously read a lot, and I remember reading once when I was young. Yeah, motivation, inspiration. Motivation's like washing. It's good to do a little bit every day. So I'm constantly looking for things and watching things, and I can watch a movie. Like I've got at home on my little IQ box the last 5 minutes of Flashdance. You know what I mean?
Watched it the other night.
It was and I'll go back to when she walks in and puts the needle on the record and off she goes. And so I think it's very good to just try and find something different that just appeals to you and go back to the things that really do resonate.
I don't like pumping up your tyres, but that resonates in your writing, doesn't it?
Look, when you can sit and have a proper crack at things, Block, it's I love that. And we'll talk a little bit later about that. But that's, it's nice to be able to
tell the story,
emotionally go somewhere after reading or seeing something.
I remember watching those Rocky films when I was a young bloke.
Same thing.
And they're sitting down and trying to do 100 push-ups and sit-ups.
Yeah, that's right.
But Rocky was the sort of movie, Matty, you'd finish it and you want to go out and train.
You would.
You wanted to go out and train, and you watched what he did, and you tried to copy that. And in the 80s, it became 70s and 80s became the cliche that coaches in what was then the New South Wales League would take their teams and they'd have either video nights or they'd go to the movies and watch whatever Rocky's out in the cinema at the time to pump up their players. But unfortunately, motivation doesn't always last.
I'm Ivan Drago. I must break you.
Blocky, you're going to lead off.
I am. Any given Sunday, Al Pacino, when he was talking about it's a game of inches, and how you got to compete all the time. Now, the motivation I got out of that was, I'm not saying that I beat everyone, or I got beaten plenty of times playing footy, but my whole motivation all the time was, don't you let anyone get over the top of you. So
and fight for the inch.
Just try. And as I said, mate, I got beat plenty of times. There's no doubt about that. The other thing too is the master stroke for a coach, in my opinion. When I was listening to that Al Pacino speech, like I was out of my gear. Like, would you call it arousal? Like, is it like?
Yes.
No, well,
it is actually.
See, what you got to do, you got to be careful about how you talk to different players and all that sort of stuff. In that speech. Like, I'm out of my gear, mate. I'm jumping out. I'm jumping out, ready to go.
Block, I imagine that's like I've been in different sheds. Block, in the Newcastle sheds, we'd be bouncing off the walls, getting ourselves, nice and high and ready to go. I've been in other sheds where guys are sort of sitting. I'm looking and there's guys yawning, and so that's demotivates me.
I was exactly the same. Olsen Filipano, the arch bumper, was a perfect example for me. We'd be getting all ready, and Terry Regan would be headbutting lockers, and I'd be going off my head. The arch bumper Olsen Filipano would be asleep in the corner before a game, and we're going off our melons. Do you know what I mean? I remember one time Terry Regan went over. We used to have like ministers and priests that would come on a Sunday, because we mainly played on a Sunday arvo. And Rigo would go over to him and say, mate, I think I'm going to kill someone today.
Yeah.
Luckily, a confession at full time.
He'd be going, mate, calm down, mate, calm down.
Let me ask you this then. You see today's dressing room, we've got the cameras in there. One, do the cameras stop that? Two, when you see them all in there just casually giving each other a hug before a game, because I've seen that in the game since I've been covering, the change from players revving up before a game. Really loud, they're noisy, they're walking around, they're hitting themselves, they're doing things, whatever gets them to a certain emotional peak.
Yep.
they get there.
Yeah.
Whereas the guys now, it's almost like it's uncool to do that. So they're very calm.
And they're all in their little pods.
But then you see teams go out, and then at the end of the game, the coach walks in and goes, "We got ambushed today."
Yeah.
And you think,
well, hello.
Mate,
Hello.
You knew what time kickoff was?
Do you know, Kenty, and the other one is the headphones.
Yeah.
See, Kenty, you came into our Newcastle shed quite a bit,
Yeah.
and we'd all pick one song each.
Yeah.
We play it pre-game. So
But not personally on one headphone.
Oh,
You
no.
mean-
It was the old ghetto blast.
100%.
Because, communally, you're getting ready to play. You're going out there together. So I don't want to sit there with my music on and looking at you, Block, and I can't talk to you because you're yours.
Yeah.
It was collectively getting up together.
Yeah.
I remember, Matty, when you guys won in '97. I can remember following you for however many of the last competition rounds, and then throughout the finals, and then at the end of every game, Holy Grail was and that was became the anthem and almost the mission statement for where you guys were on. You sort of put yourselves in that.
Yeah.
And I can remember after the game sitting outside, waiting outside the dressing room to go in and talk to you blokes. And always had to wait till that song was played. You could hear everyone in there singing, and you could feel that it was galvanising everybody, and that there was a belief that everyone was beginning to share.
I remember the touch judges in the old days used to come and knock on the shed.
Yeah.
Are you ready? Are you ready, Tigers? If we were playing at home, it was a bit of a fortress. Warren Ryan would pick up the phone as we're all going peeling out to go out, and he'd go, "I want to dial 000 today. Someone's going to get carded." As you're walking out,
Any given Sunday, it's the Americans do the sporting films so well. I think sometimes some of our sporting films have been good, but there's always just something missing. Whereas
We go too sugary sweet.
Yeah.
Mate, you know what I reckon it is? I reckon it's an Aussie thing where we don't want to get over.
we understate.
Yeah, we understate. Whereas in America, you see, everything's
Systems
big.
go.
Yeah.
That movie is a very good depiction of a club. The team's under pressure. The veteran quarterback's
Coach.
under pressure. The coach is under pressure. The owners are under pressure. And suddenly, amongst all this, particularly for the senior player, for the veteran quarterback, you got the young guy coming through.
Yeah.
And he arrives on the scene.
Yeah.
He's the flavour of the month. He's
Really
doing all
booming.
the ads. That's right, the Jamie Foxx character.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really booming.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing, Blocker. You'd have been, you're playing for Australia, you're playing State of Origin, Blocker, but you always got an eye on the young bloke coming through.
Oh, 100%. 100%. There's always someone coming through to take your spot.
The great thing about that movie, it's very the depiction of it's very real. So much that the NFL refused to allow them to use their licensing. So you've seen other movies where they'll have the Denver Broncos or the Miami Dolphins play, but in this game, because there was the drug use, there was the partying, and there was less than reputable behaviour at different times, the NFL said, no, you can't use any of our licensing.
So it's a fictional team.
So they had to come up with fictional teams. They were sharks and
Then
pirates.
they threw the alligator into
Yeah, and all
showers.
that. Lawrence Taylor was in there. Lawrence Taylor played a part in there. He was one of the mad players on the side in that team. He was one of the all-time great NFL players and changed that the position, the defensive lineman's position that he played, the outside linebacker I think he played. He's probably the greatest defensive player of all time, but lived that story in his own personal life. Became a drug addict, just basically tuned out, had to get in rehab. Lost all his money. That was in that depiction was very real to him.
That's become almost, in a lot of ways, with the NFL stereotype.
Yeah.
They're making documentaries on guys in professional sport that have lost everything over there. The other thing too, and this is really, Block again, it highlights the difference between American sport and Australian sport. The Al Pacino speech, which everyone goes, "Oh mate,
Game
it
of
just can't be
speech.
better." Now, if that was done in an Australian dressing room, blokes would be looking
Looking at each other going,
going on, mate.
As a kid.
Hey?
Yeah.
But but Matty, the whole thing about that, though,
hype.
I'll say that the whole thing about this whole podcast right now, and whatever we give us our own personal examples, is the ability to get the tone right. And some coaches have got a great ability to get the tone right. It was only not so long ago you talked about Trent Robinson when they loaded the Kilimanjaro and Hughesy said they got there and they had the night before their toughest climb, and Trent Robinson got up and gave the speech that he gives the Roosters
Yep.
when they got their darkest moment. And he gave that speech, and they're all ready to.
ready to go.
Let's go now.
Yeah. Is he a real motivational man? Is he?
Oh, he's very clear.
I think the best motivational guys is the ability to pick and choose.
Yeah.
Like Malcolm Reilly. Malcolm Reilly was a man of few words, and I've just written it down here. When you compare it to the Al Pacino speech, Al Pacino's it's a dialogue that goes on and on and on and on and on. But Malcolm Reilly's most motivational speech he did to us was, "I'd love to play alongside you fellas."
Wow.
That was it. 7 words.
That's it.
And we went right.
And because of the respect you held him.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the secret to it all. Yeah, and even to what I said before about looking at finding movies or whatever. If you can find something that has that emotional trigger in that, it finds that emotional trigger in you. That's what you got to look for. That's why you get out of bed. That's what you get going and doing what you do. And I don't believe, the old cliche, find a job you love and you never work a day in your life. I love my job.
Yeah.
Mate, I tell you what, some days it's like laying bricks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know
of
what I
course.
mean?
It's a discipline.
It is. And but if you get that emotional level right, and you can, and it sits with you, like I've just looked up the speech here. It says, I'll tell you this: in any fight, there's a guy who's willing to die, who is going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it is because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch, because that is what living is. That's 6 inches in front of your face.
Wow.
And so like that's the way you played. That's the way you played, mate.
I got beat plenty of times. Don't worry.
Yeah, but mate, but
Not a lot.
but you won more than you lost. That's the point, and that's the point for everybody. That's what you teach your kids.
Yeah.
Win more than you lose. You're gonna lose, mate. You're gonna get skin off sometimes.
Yeah, I remember a bloke who taught me, a bloke named Mike McNamara, when I finished playing, and I was lost because I played at the Tigers for 11 seasons, and I had the same locker, and I had the same place I went every day, and then all of a sudden, it was all over. So I had to go and sort of reinvent myself and go and see all these different people and talk to them. And I'm not ashamed to say I went to see this shrink, and he likened it to when a woman's kids grow up and they leave, the woman goes,
Empty nest.
What's my purpose now? So you got to find your purpose again. That's the big thing. And I was lucky enough to have like dialogue with this bloke, a bloke named Mike McNamara. He had his own business called Image Media. Anyway, I'd go and see him, and I said, "What do you want to do, mate? What do you want to do with yourself?" And that I said, "Mate, I don't really know." He said, "Mate, I've seen you do a couple of things on the telly and blah 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 blah." He said, "Mate, I'll tell you, less is more." So he goes, "Balmain boys don't cry." And just looked at me and stood there for a minute, just looking at me.
Made you realise?
No, I was going like, what does he mean? But after a while, I realised that you don't have to have this big sermon about when you're talking about something. If you get something straight to the point and go, bang, that's it, and then get out.
The book I'm going to do a bit later. So was a question I'm going to ask you about this, but I'm going to do it now because there's a lot of different ways we can go when we get to that. Was it for you? Blocker Roach was a bloke who led his pack of forwards, punched, headbutted, did whatever he had to do over the opposition pack to give his team an advantage.
Yeah.
How different was it once you retired going from Blocker Roach to Steve Roach? How difficult was it to let that bloke...
Well, mate, I can tell you the honest truth. I got in a bit of trouble. I got into a stink in the Gold Coast, right? And mate, this is all raw sort of stuff, right? I didn't start it, but I finished it, right? And then, mate, I got the flick from whatever I was doing and all that sort of stuff. And all of a sudden I had to realise what you got to understand is when you're a young bloke and you're striving to get where you want to go, and everyone's saying, mate, you're playing in the front row, don't let anyone get over the top of you, don't you take a backward step, don't you, right? And you do it for so long. And then you finish. And not that it'll ever happen now because I'm smarter now, but when you finish... and someone puts it on you in a street and you have a stink and you get in trouble for having a stink, which I did, and I got the flick from 9 and all that sort of stuff, right? It took me a long time to realise, mate, You don't need to do any of that stuff anymore, because for 12 years or 11 years, everyone's saying, don't take a backward step, don't do this, don't do that. It's embedded in you.
Get on
Trained
top of
into
it.
you.
It's trained. And then when you do it, and then everyone's sort of up you for doing something, you go, what's wrong? You taught me to be like this. This is how I am.
I see a lot of blokes,
That's the difficulty.
That's the struggle.
That's the difficulty of even today with the players, that they're trained to be warriors,
Mate.
go out and play on the weekend, but they play Friday night, play a terrific game, then Saturday night they're out having a beer, and they've got to try and be men of society again.
Yeah, someone challenges them and they go, what were they thinking? Just walk away.
Yeah.
It's instinctive.
Mate,
Yeah.
You're right. It is. You can't, and it's ego, and it's your ego too. You know, but
Also, just
but sometimes,
man,
yeah,
too.
sometimes at the end of the day, you know, because when you see the damage it does to your family and you know, to people that you know and all that sort of stuff, it's not worth it, mate.
No, and look, that's the tough.
And that's a hard
part. That's you know, I've been critical of coaches in the past, and I still think it's valid criticism in many respects, is that they spend all week training their players to be that way, and they don't ever try and show them that there's this other side. And
You decompress.
and too often, too many players get to the end of their career and they've just got this void because
Mate.
the club hasn't prepared them for it. Even though they say they do, they don't prepare
They
them
tick the
properly.
box, mate.
Or secondly, a player goes out and gets himself in trouble because he had half a dozen beers. Some blokes called him a dickhead.
Yeah, what's wrong with him? What's
Mate,
wrong with him?
If I was on the field and you called me a dickhead, mate, I'd go you.
Yeah.
And so they don't see any difference between the playing field and the nightclub, and that's where they get themselves in trouble there. But that's yeah, and unfortunately, it's a society thing.
Everyone sort of has a bit of a shot. A lot of it tongue-in-cheek at the Roosters. What Nick Politis is very good at is making players acutely aware of retirement.
Yeah.
And having, and you know,
What's your plan?
help. What's your plan? Where are you going to next? Listen, you've got all this money. I'll tell you where you should buy.
That's half.
There you go.
That's half the appeal.
A
Matty,
mentor.
of playing there for a lot of them. Like the players go there for unders because they know after it, and they're going to get good advice on what to do with their life for the next. And let's face it, it's another 30 years they're working.
That's right. Well, this is a dangerous thing, Block. You know this too. And what's really difficult, I said this the other day to someone, and they asked me, what's really tricky when you retire is that you get eulogised. People talk about you as if you've just
In
died.
past
Yeah, in the
tense.
past.
I remember we did a thing in Newcastle and I was about to go to England and people were getting up going, oh, mate, I remember when he... And I'm fucking standing.
I'm standing there. Yeah.
And I think that impacts so many people because it gives you a glimpse of the end. And a lot of blokes I know, a lot of blokes I played with and against, when they walk off that field for the last time, they feel like their best years are done.
You know, the worst question is, what are you going to do? What do you want to do? I don't know.
To your point, Matty, I agree. I've seen that a lot. I've seen players begin their careers and end their careers. Now, I've been covering the game for 25 years, so I've seen probably nearly three generations of footballers come through. And you see players who they get to the end, and some of them they'll happily go off, and you'll hear about them 5 years later, and they're in construction or they're
In the mines
doing
or
developments
whatever,
or whatever. And then you get the odd case where guys can't leave the game, can't walk away, will do anything to be still a part of the game, no matter how minor it is at the club. And there is a definite feeling there in those guys when you sit and talk to them. There's a real deep undercurrent of sadness there that the best of their life is now over. And I can understand that. I can understand the high of playing footy. You know, it's like,
You've got to try and find that high again.
You've been there.
yeah.
You've got to try and find it. How do you find it again?
Boxers do it. Walking. So it's like, I remember a few blokes say this. The greatest moment, if you could read it, I remember Cooper Cronk said, they said, if you could relive one moment, what would it be? And I loved his answer. It was when you get the knock on the door at Origin and you're leaving the dressing room to go down. Not the game. He didn't ask for the game again.
No.
He said that knock on the door and then walking down the tunnel onto the field. And it's like walking into a boxing ring. There's a power that comes through you that everybody in the crowd's there about to watch you, and you're walking in about to perform, and the nerves and the anxiety and the aggression, all that sort of just comes together, and it's an adrenaline rush, and that's why these adrenaline junkies keep chasing you. It's an adrenaline rush that's very hard to give up.
What about you, Matty, as a playmaker, right? So you and Joey, when you're at Newcastle, are running the team. Both of you are winking at each other and nudge and all that sort of stuff. When you finish, how much of a relief is it that you don't have to do that anymore?
Massive.
Really?
It's a massive relief. I think that's why the job you had and the job I had was so different. And
yeah, you're running the show.
And the other thing, that's why when I listened to the Al Pacino speech, I sort of smirked to myself, because if he gave me that speech, I'd go, yeah, coach, but how do you want me to play?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Where's it at? Yeah.
Where when you're a playmate, there's so much thinking going on through the week, it nearly drives you mad. And I knew my time was up for a couple of reasons. I was playing shit, my legs were gone, but also the fact that I started to look for something else. Whatever. I remember walking into a bookstore and there was a book on photography. I thought, oh, wouldn't that be good?
Yeah.
Like, I've never taken a photo in my life.
Yeah.
But that's what taught me you've had enough.